Welcome, friends, back to 5 Agendas. I know you've been waiting for part number 2 of the Elohim Declaration. So here it is, December 15th, 2021. A little early, but well worth the wait. The Elohim Declaration, Eternal Righteousness. Revelation 22:11, part 2. Revelation 13:8 is the heart of eternal righteousness. The heart of eternal righteousness is found in Revelation 13:8. And this verse is so uniquely positioned in the chapter and is surrounded by 2 monstrous beasts that are the apocalypse. This fact is so important that no one less than Christ ensures it is featured as the issue of Revelation 13 and the controversy of the 1290 days. Remember Matthew 24:15, where Jesus referred to, when you see the abomination of desolation, as he was giving us signs for the end. And clearly, that's for us, because the abomination of desolation is in 12:11, which means there is a future 1290 days. So there's going to be a controversy of the during a 1290 day future time frame, and Christ ensures it's featured as the issue right in the middle of Revelation 13, surrounded by 2 monstrous beasts, and it forms the heart of eternal righteousness. The 1260 days of the lion mouth beast, and the 30 days, because the 30 additional days of the 1260 brings you to the end of the 1290. So the 30 additional days of the lamb-like beast, and this is what triggers all the theological blasphemous contentions with the lion mouth and the lamb-like beast that speaks as a dragon. How is this? Well, again, after you have had time to consider the evidence of Revelation 13, do you realize concerning the imputed righteousness of the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world, you are handling precious cargo? What? Yes, the reason is that eternal righteousness infinitely transcends the 2 beasts and their demands to worship the image of the beast and to receive the mark of the beast. A little difficult? Let me read that again. After you've had time to consider what Revelation 13 is saying, do you realize that 13:8, the lamb slain from before the foundation of the world, is the imputed righteousness of the lamb? And it's precious because this eternal righteousness it transcends the 2 beasts and their demands upon us to worship the image of the beast and to receive the mark of the beast. What advice did Jesus provide about the abomination of desolation in Matthew 24:15? Nothing other than, remember? What did he give us? Because we're going to go through this time of abomination of desolation, yet future, 1290. And we're warned and given Revelation 13:8, the importance of imputed righteousness of the Lamb, because we're going to experience these 2 beasts. We're told, whoso readeth, let him understand. And also, what is really intriguing when beginning to understand the emphasis of 13:8, which states, Christ is the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world is for the reason it is obvious. The Lamb slain from the foundation of the world means he held an eternal identity with God. John 1:1, in the Alpha and the Omega, Isaiah 9, everlasting Father. So ask yourself, is this intriguing and neglected verse of 13, in fact, set in absolute contrast to the theology of the lion-mouthed beast, and when the lamb-like beast that speaks as a dragon? Compare it to what they're saying and what we're going to experience and hear come out of their mouths. When many are going to be, holding to this eternal Son of God, begotten in eternity, birthed, brought forth, emanated. When the Lamb slain before holds an eternal identity. Well, high time for the sleepy heads, virgins, to awake out of their slumber. Keep in mind there exists a transition point of prophetic powers, okay? And time between the 1260 and the 30 days, going from the the lion-mouthed, that leopard beast, first beast of Revelation 13, to the lamb-like beast with the two horns. Between these 1260, 42 months, 3.5 years, and 30 days, okay? And this is Revelation 13:8, and this makes the unique testimony of the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world. The eternal righteousness of Christ is the third angel's message in Verity. Because what's the third angel's message? In Verity? So first, the third angel, if any man worship, right? And then there's warnings. And then there's, the judgment. But here's the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. That's the eternal righteousness of Christ. And that's what we're going to have a testimony for. Because remember, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Christ's eternal identity as the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world meant he also had that eternal righteousness. You can't say, again, you cannot say that Christ has eternal righteousness, because it says his righteousness is eternal, and that he had a beginning. These are contrary one to another, and it doesn't make any sense. Okay. So because he is the Lamb slain, the fact that he is the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world means he had eternal righteousness, which means he had an eternal identity, which means he was not birthed or brought forth or emanated or anything like that at some point in eternity. And all that means is that he didn't have a beginning. In the Bible, this Elohim Declaration, the Lamb slain, the eternal righteousness of 13:8, is proving once and for all that he had eternal identity, eternal righteousness. And anything other than that is blasphemy. This is such an important aspect that the Elohim have wedged this eternal righteousness, immutable as the impenetrable immutable that stands towering and unmoved over the lion-mouthed beast, the dragon, and the lamb-like beast, and they all cannot annihilate, wow, the eternal righteousness of Christ. What is all this telling us? And what is the main central picture in Revelation? I mean, Revelation 12 says that there was war. Okay. The enemy, the war against Christ is all over his identity, his eternal identity. And this is a part of the war that you don't want to be caught up in, believing that he had a beginning or anything that denigrates his eternal identity, divinity, or dignity by saying he was birthed, brought forth, emanated, or had a beginning, but it was so far back in the ages of eternity we can't understand it. They cannot annihilate the eternal righteousness of Christ. It stands firm. And that's what we want to subscribe to. That's what we want to have, the imputed righteousness of Christ. And we can't have that imputed righteousness when we're denying the aspect that he had an eternal righteousness and was eternal and never had a beginning. And that's why the aspect of Melchisedec, without father, without mother, without beginning of days, which means he had eternal righteousness, he had an eternal identity. This is therefore the third angel's message in Verity. It is the basis, which is the everlasting gospel and righteousness by faith, true righteousness by faith, that forms the impenetrable defense of those who have the testimony of Jesus. See, these that have the testimony of Jesus, they're going to be talking about his eternal identity and eternal righteousness and how to explain how we partake of his imputed righteousness. From 12:11. The only thing the old serpent can convey during the abomination of desolation, it's before us, it's going to be a counterfeit righteousness. And that, unfortunately, exists today, since the dragon wants to defeat what he never had, which was eternal righteousness. The reason will surprise you. The serpent's guile delivered a counterfeit righteousness with Eve. And that was the self-righteousness. Because remember, the lie was, you shall not surely die. You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. This aspect of the eternal righteousness of the Lamb slain is a simple and profound mystery that defeats the mystery of iniquity, Satan, yet definitely today is not understood in its purpose of the apocalypse and the abomination of desolation. There's going to be a future abomination of desolation, a time, a 1260, a 1290. And we need to know how to have a testimony against this mystery of iniquity, this counterfeit righteousness. And it's going to be the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world and his eternal righteousness. Here you have, and don't ever forget this, the Elohim Declaration of 22:11. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He which is filthy, let him be filthy still. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. He that is holy, let him be holy still. That's the Elohim Declaration of 22:11. And this, he that is righteous, that is holy. What does that mean? It's the genuine righteousness, Christ's righteousness, Christ in you, the imputed righteousness of Christ. And what does he impute? Only his eternal righteousness. And how can he that is righteous, he that is holy, be declared that when out of their mouth comes guile, that Christ was birthed, brought forth, begotten, emanated, and didn't have an eternal identity as the Word in John 1:1. As he said, I am Alpha and Omega. When we say that he's the eternal Son of God, he was birthed or brought forth, we're calling him a liar. Revelation 22:11 is a majestic declaration that proceeds forth from the domain of the divine, and a scripture text that has not yet been fully discovered or resolved. Just as Revelation 13:8 has not yet been fully discovered, acknowledged, or resolved. What will be shown is how the Elohim Declaration of what we just read, with a grammatical structure of 2 couplets. Okay, so here's your 2 couplets, 1 and 2. And in those 2, you have 2 parts of unjust and filthy, and here's 2 parts of righteous and holy. So there's 2 couplets, holds all the tenets of eternal righteousness of the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world. And that's Christ and his righteousness. He that is righteous, he that is holy, it's not our righteousness, it's not our holiness, it's his. Christ and his righteousness, the imputed righteousness of Christ. Imputed, only he can give it. And that's not a counterfeit. And is the essence of the Elohim Declaration concerning the everlasting gospel, the age-long gospel. This right here, this declaration, is what he has declared and wanted to accomplish as the age-long. Glad tidings, the everlasting gospel. The immediate context of Revelation 22:11, right, recognizes Jesus Christ's eternal identity as the Alpha and the Omega. Because look, here in 22:11, here you have this Elohim Declaration, and within that context, you have the Alpha and the Omega. So again, you're saying, he says, I'm Alpha and Omega. And if we were to say, well, no, that's not true. He had a beginning at some point. Like Wagner. Christ is righteousness, okay? But so far back, we can't comprehend it. We're calling him a liar. Rejecting the everlasting gospel, forfeiting our birthright, his imputed righteousness, and saying his eternal identity, eternal righteousness, well, it's not as eternal as we thought. No, let us not ever take that position or claim or say that. And that Alpha and Omega, there in 22:13 and 16, which has the same meaning as the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world, because both reveal an eternal identity. 13:8, who is also worthy of worship, because we're told to worship him that made. First angel's message, 14:7, and therefore the only righteousness of 22:11 must be eternal. So anyone who wants to say otherwise, if you're not subscribing to his eternal righteousness, recognizing that he has an eternal identity, and throwing upon him the eternal Son of God error, think of the consequences, because you're either going to be, have this testimony, because those that have that testimony have no guile in their mouth. So we're not going to be going around saying this, begotten in eternity, brought forth, emanated, Gnosticism, triune Trinity, guile. This eternal righteousness is the only righteousness of Christ. There is no other. But be warned, there is a counterfeit. Because they're ever genuine, there is a counterfeit. Because he too was eternal. It is imputed by faith to us, as is the account of Abraham in Romans 4. It was imputed to him. The eternal identity and righteousness of Melchisedec. Christ was the Word, the Logos, Melchisedec. And with that comes his eternal righteousness. It was imputed to Abraham. Don't you want that imputed to you? Who was without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils. And for more on this, see our recent videos on Melchizedek, part 1, 2, and 3. The Elohim Declaration of eternal righteousness. The structure of the Elohim Declaration is 2 grammatical couplets of association. Unjust or filthy. This is the first couplet. There exists for those so declared something very obvious. They held no belief in the eternal righteousness, identity, and eternal righteousness of Christ. Some say to be declared unjust or filthy still is a comparison to venal or mortal sin as transgression of the law, equals Roman Catholic Church concept. And oddly enough, it is found in the legalist mindset of Laodicea, who say this is the reason why the declaration of unjust and filthy still exists. Now here's your second couplet. Righteousness and holy. The first thing to notice in these 2 groups is that 1, the righteousness, and 2, the holy, they are found specifically in Revelation 7, 1-4, and 9. And again, what is that? So briefly. So after these things, I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that they should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Another angel standing from the east, having the seal of the living God, cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Okay. The second couplet. Okay, the righteous and the holy, they're found right there. That's the sealing. Again, the measure for the sealing is the eternal righteousness of the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world. So here you have in Revelation 7, it talks about this group, this 144,000 sealed. Well, what does that mean? What are they sealed with? The eternal righteousness of the Lamb. And that's where 13:8 comes into the picture. And then the Elohim Declaration of 22:11. And it is the only basis of the Elohim Declaration of righteous still, and he who remains holy still. Nothing more and nothing less. Those sealed righteous and holy have a sealed status. For example, the virgins of Revelation 14:5 have an essential attribute. They have no guile, and that defines their testimony. They are not going to be repeating the errors of the Triune Trinity, or Gnosticism, or Emanationism, or begotten in eternity. And that testimony is a Revelation 12:11 status. By the word of their testimony, they overcome, and by the blood of the Lamb. And that's a perfect testimony, friends. Why is this? No guile exists in unclean, sinful flesh. What many assume is that the sealing cleanses before the sealing. But is the cleansing actually, in fact, all about those? Is the cleansing actually, in fact, all about those who have no guile? So isn't that all the more important that we get our testimony pure and stop repeating counterfeits? Their testimony is of Christ, and it'll be rooted in John 1:1 and the Alpha and the Omega and his eternal righteousness. They'll be giving a testimony about and for the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And they will be saying and repeating John 1:1, testifying to his eternal righteousness, his eternal identity, as opposed to those who will be testifying that what? He had a beginning. That's not Alpha and Omega. And Revelation 14:7, and why we're told to worship him. He who made, who was eternal. And that's the first angel. Keep in mind, the Elohim Declaration is final. It doesn't change. Okay? Anyone in the first couplet, filthy and unclean, don't become, after that declaration, holy or righteous. There is no point of return or second hopes once the time of Revelation 7, the sealing, has passed. Keep also in mind the smallest mustard seed of faith in Christ is imputed. Remember he talked about the mustard seed? You know, I even have here a little journal. Faith can move mountains. It's that mustard seed. An important aspect to notice with the Elohim Declaration is how there is a status from righteous to righteous still, or holy to holy still. Those sealed as righteous and holy have faith in the same righteousness of Christ as did Abraham. And remember, Melchisedec met Abraham, and this imputed righteousness and the faith of Abraham wouldn't have held any guile regarding Melchizedek having a beginning at some point in eternity that's beyond our comprehension. As Paul says in Hebrews, without father, without beginning, without mother. Those sealed as righteous and holy have faith in the same righteousness of Christ, which is eternal, as did Abraham, are at a later point in prophecy, which is the scenario of the third woe. We're going to be getting into that, and are declared righteous and holy still. Eternal righteousness is imputed by faith to all who believe. His eternal righteousness, which means he has an eternal identity, that is imputed by faith to all who believe. Romans 4:11 and 24. Therefore, by the time Revelation 7, the sealing has passed, which is prior to the 7 trumpets and 3 woes. Yep, we're going to get to that. Revelation 7, the sealing, is prior to the 7 trumpets and 3 woes. The apparent conclusion is those sealed righteous still may not have heard sanctuary theology or awareness of the Godhead, but they do respond to the call of the first angel. And this is why the first angel is so important and what it's really going to do. Why? As the apocalypse unfolds, the time of the deadly wound of the seventh king in 1710 and 13:3, deadly wound, one of his heads receives a deadly wound. In 1710, he continues a short time, okay? As all this starts to unfold, this deadly wound of this seventh king, who's a future before us, due to the actions of the 10 kings of 17, 16, and 17, because remember those 7? And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So what these actions of these 10 kings, led by this 8th king, after that comes after the 7th, after the deadly wound and its healing, they destroy the woman in Vatican City. The righteous respond to the first angel's message and came out. Babylon, come out of her, my people. Okay, so there's the first angel. They respond, they come out. There's the warning there in Revelation 18. There's the sealing, and then there's the trumpets and the woes. Okay, the Elohim Declaration is a judgment at a point in time and is determined on nothing other than what Revelation 22:11 says. And what is that? Righteousness. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. The Elohim Declaration, that's the eternal righteousness of Christ. To say otherwise, that he had a beginning, is denying eternal righteousness, denying the Elohim Declaration, denying the Lamb slain from, that he is the Lamb slain from before the foundation of the world, denying that he is the Alpha and the Omega. It states he that is righteous, and that state of an awareness of righteousness, the only true righteousness is of Christ, the Word, and therefore it can only be an eternal righteousness by faith. The declaration states the righteous is to remain righteous still. Okay? But guess what? The smallest belief of faith in his eternal righteousness is what saves. It's not our righteousness. It's not our works. It's not a works-based anything. It's the smallest belief of faith in his eternal righteousness, which will not be denying the fact that he had an eternal identity. We should recall why Jesus made reference to the mustard seed, which is the smallest of the seeds. Note how the relevance of Matthew 19:25-26. When his disciples heard it, they were exceedingly amazed, saying, "Who then can be saved?" But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, "With men this is impossible," see? "But with God all things are possible," because it's his eternal imputed righteousness that all men are saved. God has not complicated salvation or the meaning of imputed righteousness about the end point of Revelation 22:11. Men have. Jesus instructs on the problems that exist of superiority of theology in Mark 9:38 and Luke 9:54. So we can have this, we have the superiority of theology, there will be no boasting. Both accounts clearly show the projection of self-righteousness, whether intended or not. Now, please review the text, because the carnal mind and sinful flesh inflates self-righteousness, pious attitudes, religious humbug, and bad theology. And guess what? It still festers. Is this because men don't know their Bible? the shut door. Mark 9 and Luke 9, right here, okay? Click on those links in the thought paper that will be in the description box below for part 2. Mark 9 and Luke 9 highlight the midnight cry and the foolish virgins finding the door was shut. Remember in the parable? The real problem for Laodicea then, when entering the time of Revelation 13:8, this future 1260, 1290, which is recorded as being between the 1260 and the 1290 days, what's going to be Laodicea's problem in this future time, when there's going to be a testimony needed that's without guile to overcome things, the bad things that we're warned about in Revelation? What's going to be the problem? The Triune Trinity. There's one God, Eternal Son. Error found in fundamentals number 2 and 4. And God knoweth those who will realize this is what cancels. What? The error of the Godhead cancels eternal righteousness by the belief of the central dogma of the little horn? It does, friends. I mean, in all simplicity, Laodicea is going to be going around spitting out fundamentals 2 and 4. There's only one God, the unity of 3 co-eternal beings, which is just echoing the same thing that the central doctor of the little horn, the woman of Revelation 17, is spitting out. And that cancels his eternal righteousness. Because it's not John 1:1. I mean, you're saying, if you're saying there's only one God, well, what about the Logos in John 1:1, who is also eternal, who claims Alpha and Omega, and that there's 2 of them? I mean, how can you say there's only one when there's 2 in beginning? And that's the huge problem. And why it's the masterpiece of deception and deviltry, these fundamentals, the central doctrine of the little horn, the Triune Trinity, monotheism. It cancels eternal righteousness by the belief in the central doctrine of the little horn. Why? Simply because they believe a doctrine that lessens his eternal righteousness. John 1:1 is saying there were 2 in beginning and they're both eternal. And Christ had an eternal righteousness. He has an eternal identity. But if you're saying, well, there was only one, you're denying him. And if you deny him, you deny the Father too. And if you deny his eternal righteousness by saying, well, you can't say he had an eternal righteousness and then turn around and say, well, he had a beginning, but it's a long time ago. Absolutely not. And he lessens the eternal righteousness of he who made, whom we're told to worship in Revelation 14:7. They do not recognize the fundamentals are saying Christ was a son in eternity, which is contrary to John 1, just as Laodiceans will say there were 3 co-eternals, which is contrary to John 1:1. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in the beginning, which is, again, contrary to John 1:1. What does this mean? It's time that we take John 1:1 for what it is saying, 2 in beginning, and also what it is not saying. There were not 3, and that there was not in this eternal Son of God thing. Now some may cringe, oh, you're denying that he's the Son of God. No. You're accepting that he was the Son of God by decree. And that he had an eternal righteousness. Well, isn't God reminding everyone that regarding anything that deforms eternal righteousness is and that it is contrary to John 1, 1-3, as well as the third angel's warning, is warranted? Yeah, he's reminding us. He's telling us it's warranted. We cannot deform his eternal righteousness and go against John 1, 1 or the third angel's warning. Foremost is a serious dilemma Laodicea will face, and this is where it gets scary, which is with one, the Shema in Deuteronomy 6:4, and we know there's a genuine and a counterfeit, and two, the one God triune Trinity doctrine legacy. The false Shema, there's only one God. God with the one God triune Trinity doctrine. This is the serious dilemma that Laodicea will face. And that's why the message to Laodicea is, if any man, because Laodicea does not come through, I will spew thee out of my mouth, is the testimony of the true witness. And that it does not reconcile with John 1 or Revelation 22, which is in fact the context of eternal righteousness, which proves his eternal identity, which emphasizes his eternal righteousness. You can't have one without the other. And that eternal righteousness of the Elohim Declaration in 22:11, and the testimony that he is the Lamb slain in 13:8, and to be worshipped as eternal Father, number 2, in 14:7, he who made. Due to the events of the seventh king of Revelation 17, 15, and 18, so due to those events and what this is going to entail, which is in fact prior to the 42 months, your 1260 of the first beast of Revelation 13. This is why when Laodicea must make a choice to come out of Babylon, because God said the scarlet woman and all her teachings and great city are destroyed. So 5 are fallen: Justinian, Charlemagne, Otto the Great, Charles V, and Napoleon. 1 is King Victor Emmanuel, and that's done. The 7th king, he lasts for a short time. Why? Because 13 says one of his heads receives a deadly wound, and then there's a healing, and then all the world wonders, and then there's 1260. Okay, so the events of this 7th king, it's prior to the 42 months, because the deadly wound happens, and then the 1260, and not the other way around, with the 1260 from 538 to 1798, and then the deadly wound with, the Pope. The events of the 7th king, deadly wound, are in fact prior to the 42 months, and that's can be proven by Revelation 13, because it says deadly wound, healing, then 1260 of that first beast. There's the message. Come out. Laodicea must make a choice, because what comes after the 7th king is the 8th. And in combination with these 10 kings that hate the whore, she's destroyed. So they have to come out before that. So hopefully this helps. This is part 2. Next will be part 3. And, even when part 2 and part 3 of this, ends, we'll be covering it more and more. So if you're struggling, don't worry. This is this, like it says, like we've said in the preface, the Masterpiece of Divinity series examined Christ's eternal divinity, and that's what we've gone over. And now with the precision, we continue to examine Christ's eternal righteousness and the importance and what it means and what it's going to mean for us during this 1290 future time of this abomination of desolation. And this uniqueness of the Lamb slain, the Elohim Declaration, remains so important. Nothing else should hold our attention. Stay tuned for part 3. God bless. Hope this helps. Take care, and we'll see you soon.